welcome back, everybody. If you're hearing my voice right now, it means it's time for another episode of Jason's Game Room, the YouTube channel where I talk about everything gaming, from video games to board games to dice, CCGs, Dungeons and Dragons. If it's gaming, it's on this channel. Now, before I get started on today's show, if you haven't already, please check out my Splinter series called The Basics. And as the name implies, it gives you the basics in short videos on CCGs and how they work and everything about them. CCGs have been dear to my heart since I started playing them in the early 90s when they came out, so I decided to create a secondary mini-series based on that. So, like I said, go check it out. Now, getting right into today's topic, I want to talk about board games. I've kind of neglected the topic since I started Jason's Game Room, but more specifically, I want to talk about several board games that are near and dear to my heart, and I do own them as well. Well, there might be one on this list I don't own, but for the most part, I do. So let's get started. The first game I want to talk about is a classic. It's one of the best board games ever created, in my opinion, and it is Monopoly. I've been playing Monopoly since I was a kid. It was one of the first board games, aside from Snakes and Ladders, that I was introduced to, and my parents always saw it necessary for me to get involved in adult board games more so than the kid ones when I was young. Even going so far as to get me into Trivial Pursuit when I was 8 or 9 years old. I did have a high comprehension when I was a kid, so it wasn't hard for me to get into these games. Anyways, Monopoly is some of my earliest recollections of board games, and you have to understand that I played mainly with my family for many years. And my father, who is an interesting person, always kept the game something I wanted to play, mainly because he cheated on and off, which was funny. And years later, it dawned on me why he always wanted to be the banker in the game, especially when throughout the course of the game, he had houses and hotels on properties and stacks of cash long before anyone else, but I never clued in because I was too young and I just assumed because he was my dad, he was the best Monopoly player on the planet. Well, that perception changed a little bit over the years. Regardless, even playing with family, we did have a lot of fun with Monopoly. It was one of those board games that everybody could get into. The main issues I had playing Monopoly is that, and I didn't notice this till much later, getting into adulthood playing, is that I tended to not buy anything off the bat. I would kind of watch for several turns to see what other people were doing, and that would inhibit me. I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give you when you're playing Monopoly is once you have enough money, start buying properties as soon as you hit them. The more properties and utilities you gather right off the start will pretty much assure you a nice spot in the game later on. And by having these properties early, even if you don't have houses on them yet, you're still getting money from other players who land on them. I never did that in the first bunch of years I played. Even as a kid learning the game, I still just sat back and observed too often, as it was pointed out to me many times. And even though, as I mentioned, my father was a bit of a cheater playing the game, he was always the first person to snap up properties and utilities, and I'm of the opinion that even if he did not cheat as often as he did, and I'm not saying that in a bad way because it's quite funny, I'm guessing that he would have won regardless just because of the sheer amount of properties and utilities. And another facet of the game that always annoyed me was landing in jail and you didn't have a get out of jail card. That would inhibit you as well. But it was a lot of fun. I would like to play Monopoly again. I do have a mint edition copy of the game that hasn't been opened in several years. But again, life. My parents are quite older now. They don't play board games anymore. The couple friends I do have were never big on Monopoly. They're more into the action-adventure board game. So it's not something I've played in a while. But that being said, there is a board game I own that's one of my favorites of all time as well, that I have played recently. I think last time I played was maybe last winter or before that. Oh no, sorry, the winter before last. And this is the world domination board game known as Risk. Arguably my favorite board game because, as I mentioned, it is all about taking over the world. You have your little pieces, you have countries on the continents, you go to war with your opponents, and there are people that say Risk is too hard because once you get down to maybe only a couple territories, it's hard to go back and win. I disagree. I started playing Risk in high school, and in my urban geography class in grade 12, it was actually one of our requirements that every Friday was dedicated to Risk. So for that hour and a quarter class, we played Risk all class, and it actually taught us a lot of valuable skills. Strategy, we had to think, geography at the same time, and in that class, I do remember one Friday where I was playing with two other people at my table and who are quite good at Risk because it was always the three of us. That's one of the best tables in the class playing. And there was that one Friday we were playing. I got down to 2 or 3 territories, which is usually the death knell for you at that point because Risk is one of those games where if you start getting crunched and losing territories, it doesn't end well. But I got down to 2 or 3 territories in that game on that Friday, and before the bell rang, I came back and won that round. Very rare for that to happen. More often than not, if you do get down that hard in Risk, you're pretty much done for. But I came back, I won it, and the two gentlemen I played with at the time, I believe their names were Nick and Dirk, they were extremely surprised at how that happened. I was not able to replicate it. The following Friday in class, it happened again. I was down to 2 territories, and I was subsequently wiped out by Nick. So, but Risk has it all. You're gobbling up countries in the early going. You're putting your artillery and your troops down, and then you start going to war and trying to expand your influence on the map. Risk is a game that can go anywhere from a half hour to several hours, depending on how many players and how good your opponents are. I've had games last a short time, and I've had games go many hours because I believe the last round that I played of Risk, we had 4 of us playing. We had me, my best friend, his brother, and their father all playing. And that was a hell of a good round because the battles were fast and furious, and ultimately my best friend ended up winning. Surprisingly, because he didn't look like he was doing much, but while the other 3 of us were busy attacking each other, he was sitting back there and waiting, and then he picked apart the bones of whoever was left. Interesting strategy. And that's why Risk is a great board game. Strategies come into play when you start battling. You might think, oh, you just sit there, oh, I'm just going to attack that guy. No. You actually have to plan in your head in a short period of time what you're going to attack, who owns it, why, and the collateral damage that might happen after you do attack it. It's not as cut and dry as just, oh, I'm sending my troops over there. Let's see what happens. No. It's very involved. And I've played some very involved games over the years that were so much fun, it's not even funny. Another board game that I own, that I've played sparingly, but that I've also modified, and some people might be surprised at this because you'd think I'm going to bust out a fantasy board game here or something science fiction. No, believe it or not, it's the good old game of life. And I'm not talking about the one I'm living right now that's kicking my ass. I'm talking about the actual board game of life with the spinning wheel and everything. It's actually a fun little game. Some people think, oh, you just go around and make money and make babies in your car and get married. It's a fun game, and I've taken the liberty of adding several spaces on little paths to the game to make it even more interesting, but it's a lot of fun. And the last time I did play it, I laughed my brains out, and so did the people I played with, that being my friends. And especially when you and your friends are playing, and you and one of your other friends only have 2 kids in your car, and your third friend has not only a full car of kids, but he's got 2 more dragging behind him. It's like, how did that even... That alone we were laughing about for, I think, an hour afterwards, because we're not even sure how that was possible, but it happened. As the game of life suggests, you're going through either college or university when you start, or you're just going right to career. You're trying to make more money in your salary. and get ahead of the other players, get married, make babies, make life choices, buy a house, insurance. You're juggling everything as you work your way around the twisting pathway that leads you to the end. And when you get to the end, either retirement or your full payout, whoever has the most amount of money and stocks at the end wins. And that can go up or down. I've seen it where I've started out and managed to get swapped in career and everything. I went from a 90,000 payday to a 20,000 with a friend of mine, and still ended up eking out a win because of the life tiles and everything else I had. And I've seen runaways happen where someone's got the huge salary off the bat. The rest of us didn't get much of a salary, and he literally and figuratively ran away on the board and ended up with all the money at the end. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Just like real life, except it's more fun. And then you can pack it up and not worry about it. You can't do that in regular life, can you? You can't just pack it up into a box and toss it aside for a while, as much as we want to. But an honorable mention, it's hard to call it a board game because of the way it looks, but an honorable mention would be Battleship. That was a classic fun game that my dad and I used to play, taking shots, trying to find each other's ships and sinking them. And we also modified it ourselves by playing the game Salvo within Battleship, where you fire 5 shots at once, not just one. And as you can see where this is going by mentioning my father, he would move his ships around, even during Salvo, and I'm wondering why I'm always hitting nothing but water. But it was fun. We had a lot of good laughs with that, so I didn't mind. As far as the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty, the highs of all the board games I mentioned is never-ending fun. The lows would be sometimes that, especially with Monopoly and Risk, the games kind of drag on a bit, and you get the odd game where you're kind of like, oh man, I wish this was over. But downright dirty, I don't think there is any, because all these games are great board games, and it's hard to have a downright dirty when these games provide so much fun, even if they do drag on from time to time. So I'm going to leave it there for today. And I hope you all enjoyed me rambling on about board games. If you have a favorite board game that you've loved, please tell me in the comments, and maybe I'll talk about it in a future show. Let's start a discussion on board games, all right? Thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, and also tune into the basics. You're going to like it. I did it. Come on. Peace out, everybody. Have a great day.